It's episode 688. That's right, 688. And we are talking about assessing your efforts. And today we're going to talk about what Tom and I discovered over the course of a week of discussions around assessing your efforts. Maybe you listened to one or more of the episodes, or maybe you binged them, or you're catching this now. What have you thought about? What have you learned about assessing your efforts in the last week, months? Be curious to hear in the comments. We're going to give you what we think and a whole lot more on today's episode of Today's Antidote. Yeah, that's it. That's the name.
Stay tuned for today's Antidote, brought to you by the Renegade Success Network. Today's Antidote features a healthy dose of thought-provoking insights and information for business owners, entrepreneurs, leaders, and nonprofit professionals. Each day since March of 2020, this program has offered that one thing to help you continue on your own unique pathway to success. And now, Renegades, we bring you Bob Graham and Tom Brush.
Oh, I fell into the trap again. The today in this last sentence. It drives me crazy.
And you were doing so well.
I thought I was doing really well, and then I lost it at the end. Now, if I'm assessing my efforts, I need to think about that ending more.
Differently.
Uh-oh. Did you freeze on me?
No.
Oh, you just stopped talking. You didn't say anything.
I did say something.
Oh, I didn't hear it.
You said I need to think about it more, and I just said you need to think about it differently.
Okay, fair enough. So how are you today?
I'm doing very well, thanks.
Awesome.
Yeah. Survived a nice night. Some good work with a client. Friday. Get to do some more lacrosse today, so it's a good day.
Oh, you do get more lacrosse today. Nice.
I do. It's a busy lacrosse weekend.
All right.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Antidote, as Bob shared. Our daily, weekday conversation around different topics that have an impact over leaders. Some good work. We try to help you figure out how to take your next step along your own unique pathway to success. And so as we go through our discussion this morning, where we will be sharing our discoveries of the week, talking about assessing your efforts, we encourage you to share your thoughts and ideas in the comments, whether you are watching or listening on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, or
LinkedIn Live, baby. LinkedIn Live, baby. I'm in a building with no one, so I can yell it as loud as I want. That's rare.
Fair enough. Bob's fired up again. Interesting.
I am.
So, of course, please feel free to share your thoughts and ideas, because we know that it'll add value to our show and impact what we have to say. And at the end of the conversation, Bob and I will each offer our one thing, our today's antidote. That thing that we hope will help you when you're stuck, frustrated, or overwhelmed, figure out how to take that next step along your own unique pathway to success. Maybe it's today, and maybe it's somewhere further down the road. And of course, if you have a discovery that you would like to share, please feel free to share that in the comments as well. Because we know that what's real for you might be different than what's real for us. And when you share what's real for you have an opportunity to impact someone else. And they may be looking for exactly what you have to offer. So please feel free to share that in the comments. Now, before we get to our discoveries of the week, every morning, Bob and I do our celebrations. So, Bob, what are you celebrating this morning?
I am celebrating that. Yeah, Stephen's asking, is this live? This is live, Stephen. We are live. It is 7:08 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, actually Eastern Daylight Time, USA. Right? Daylight time still.
No idea. I just know
There
it's
you
live.
go. So I'm celebrating that I was invited to a networking event last night with in Washington, D.C., and it was a whole bunch of movers and shakers. And sometimes those events can be a little intimidating. And I had someone come up to me towards the end and say, you know, I watched you through this whole event. You really know how to work a room. And it's funny how people just watch you and they see you do things, and you just do them because you do them, and you don't think you're good at something. And then someone says something like that to you and you go, oh, wow, I guess I was noticed. And this was a person I met early on in the evening. And, you know, I did the standard 3-minute, 4-minute discussion. And then, hey, I know you're looking for other people to talk to. I'm going to let you go find them. And are you yawning on me, Tom?
I had to cough. Is that
Oh,
all right?
okay. I thought you were yawning on me. I was like, wow,
Yes.
I feel like I'm teaching college again.
All right.
So
Sensitive
it
over
says more
there.
about me probably than you. So that was really a unexpected aspect of doing a networking event. That I really walked into this thing somewhat intimidated and walked out of it like, wow, okay, that wasn't so bad after all. And I'm sure there are people out there saying I'm intimidated every time I do a networking event, or I don't do networking events because I find them so intimidating. So if that's something that someone wants to talk more about, I'm happy to have that discussion. You can private message me or track me down, and we can talk about some of the tricks and things I do to make it work. How about you, Tom?
So while you were off networking, which is great, I had the opportunity to go. I had a client who we've been working on this. They have some challenges they're facing, and they actually have to move locations. And so they had sort of an emergency meeting because we've been working on this project for a while. And last night was sort of an opportunity to assess, interestingly enough, where they were at. And, not as much as a way to assess their efforts, more to assess the situation and what has happened, which is a little bit around assessing their efforts. Do some more lacrosse today, so it's good. What are you doing over there?
Sorry, I don't know why I hit the wrong button and I was getting the LinkedIn feed.
Okay, fair enough.
LinkedIn is live, I can assure you.
All right. They had a really good discussion, and I think they've come to a next step, which was helpful. I think the organization's been a little all over the place in a positive way, I think, as they were trying to look at all the different opportunities that were out there. And I think it was getting to the point where it's overwhelming. And I think they were getting stuck in some regards because they hadn't been able to choose the next step. And so last night we got to a point where they chose the next step. And so I think that will help them continue to move forward. And I thought one of the things I thought was fascinating about it was while they've chosen the next step, they also realized that other opportunities could still come up, that we could head down this pathway and take steps to what might be the final outcome. And at the same time, opportunities may show up out of the blue. They're looking for a location, and they've had a number of conversations. And while they've now decided to kind of go one way, they've had other conversations that might turn around and come back to them and say, hey, we have this idea, or we have these resources that we'd like to share. And I think that was a real awakening, I guess, is the way I would put it, for some of the people in the room, that you don't have to just choose your path and just go down there blindly without looking at anything else. That other things, you can be open to other opportunities as they arise, and then make a choice based on that. So I was happy to be a part of it. Felt like I sort of helped them get to where they want to go, and remind them that that just because we've headed down this pathway doesn't mean we have to close off every other possibility. If somebody decides they want to drop some resources in their lap, you can still change direction and take that opportunity. So it was a good night for that.
I like how you talk about some things that we actually talk about and that we actually help people with and applied it. That, you and I aren't just throwing words at people. We actually believe what we're talking about. We actually do what we say, and we use that when we work with people. So I appreciate you sharing that, just so it doesn't sound like we're just sitting here talking, but we're actually talking about things that we do each day.
Well, I think, yes, I'm hoping that people, after 688 episodes, believe that there's a little bit more behind to it than just the two of us sitting here having a conversation.
I'm sitting. Are you standing?
No, I'm not.
So, Tom, it's Discoveries of the Week. My favorite episode, because we get the opportunity to I think for me, it's really a transformation over the course of the week. And if I may begin, we've been talking about assessing your efforts, and I really think that the gold for me was yesterday when we were talking through the idea of who's assessing you and where the individual, my personal assessment, fits in with other people's assessment. And I thought that was a really useful discussion for me, especially because I struggle with that. Other people's opinions matter more to me than my own. And so I really was enjoying the discussion and the thought. And it really occurs to me that in a perfect world, at least for me, I want it to be a situation where I'm gathering other people's input, but ultimately that decision comes down to me. How I assess it comes to me. Yes, my boss or you can say, hey, Bob, I didn't like the way you spoke on that program. I didn't like what you said, or you talked about things in a way that I wasn't comfortable with. All those things can happen. But ultimately, the real decider of my actions is me, not other people. And I think as I think through that more and as I try to apply that, and I was thinking about it yesterday while I was driving, the more I rely on myself, I think the clearer my path becomes, because I'm the only person who knows my unique pathway. No one else can know it. You haven't been through my experiences. You don't know what I know. You don't know the experiences I've had. You know a lot of them, but you haven't been in my seat, nor have I been in your seat. And I think so often what we do is we want someone else to tell us what to do so we can avoid the responsibility. But if we're each working on going down our own unique pathway towards success, then we have to take responsibility for the things that go well and the things that don't go well along that pathway, because no one else can be on my unique pathway. By definition, it's my own. And I think that really came up for me in the discussions.
Well, I enjoyed that conversation as well. I wasn't sure that you were going to say you enjoyed it, because I think one of the interesting things around that idea is that, yes, it's our unique pathway, and yes, we make those decisions. And if we don't allow from some external feedback, how will we ever grow? We could just become, again, I have this feeling last night that if I hadn't have said something, that this group was going to be like, and actually made some comments of like, well, how do we communicate with these other people who we've spoke to that might still have opportunities that we're heading down this path? It's almost like they were thinking, okay, once we make this choice, we have to close ourselves off to everything else. And I think that that's sometimes what happens is we feel like, okay, this is my path. I'm the only one who can choose. Everything else is just outside noise. And so, and I should avoid it. And I think that there's more to it than that, is that it's our unique pathway, because we take all this stuff in and then we choose where we want to go. Because we could easily just take all this stuff in and go exactly where somebody tells us to go. And sometimes we need to do, again, we choose to do that. You mentioned if your boss provides you with some feedback around how you're doing things, you could choose to take that feedback and do it because you feel like that's how you're going to keep your job. That's a choice. You could also choose like that. You could say that person doesn't know what they're talking about. This is what's real for me, and I'm going to choose to do it the way that I believe. And that's fine as well, as long as you understand that there could also be some ramifications to that, just based on the situation that you're in. And I think that that's why sort of I love that, what you were talking about. And I believe that it's unique because we make the choices based on all the opportunities that we have and the feedback that we've gotten. Which is why I see the value in others' feedback. I don't see it as any more valuable than any other. Then you take it all together, synthesize it, process it, and then figure out how to move forward.
If you're able to do that. Sometimes I think we get bogged down by other people's feedback or our own feedback.
Yes,
when
or
you're in
our
school,
own
how
fear.
many times did you think you bombed the test only to get your test grade back and you had a 94. We're not always the best predictors of our performance. Oh, you had 104 probably because you're really smart.
I didn't say that. Yeah, I think that there's always different perspectives, right?
Okay. But I'm not sure we're the best gauge of our own a lot of times. We can weigh things too heavily on the negative side, and we can weigh them too heavily on the positive side. We don't moderate very well. I think that's where the external feedback often provides us the most value is if you go to enough people or if people understand you well enough, I think they provide you the balancing act.
Maybe. I think that's what's interesting about, that's why I try to look at it all as just feedback. For somebody who doesn't choose to use those two words, negative or positive, because I think otherwise if we think of them that way, it can be very easy if we consider it negative to get upset, frustrated, start judging ourselves. If we think it's too positive, we can go the other way of like, oh, I've got it all down, I don't need to worry about it. So as an example of that, 2 weeks ago, I did a presentation to a conference, and I actually reached out. Well, as it turns out, the person who was leading the conference sent a note to thank some people who participated in it for speaking. And so I wrote back and I said, hey, I was just curious if you got any feedback, because I'm always looking to try to evaluate, assess how I did and figure out how to move forward. And so they sent a note, and I think it was all the feedback. I'm not 100% positive on this. At least, and there were 20 people in the room or so. 3 people in their comments, 3 or 4, specifically said Tom Brush was engaging, whatever, and all of the feedback I could have looked at as, if I use that word, positive. And it could have been very easily for me to say, oh yeah, I got it down, I nailed that. And not think about what could I potentially do differently? What might I do differently? And I've already thought of a number of things from that presentation that I could do differently. And so while this was helpful, it was nice to hear, I didn't take it as like, I've got this presentation down and I never have to practice it again. I just have to show up and give it, because they enjoyed it so much or found value in it. And so what I think was helpful, because I had already assessed my own efforts, this was just additional feedback looking for something, something new that I hadn't considered or I didn't have the perspective of, because my perspective was standing in the front of the room watching the people in front of me, and theirs was completely different and from all different sides of angles from the room. And so I think that it's just feedback, and the more we can get closer to that, I think the more we can get comfortable with the choices that we make, and not get into what I think is my one thing, or my discovery this week, is that I think so often we just turn to judgment, and when we try to assess our efforts, and that just leads to getting us stuck and frustrated and overwhelmed, and and afraid to take the next step, whatever it might be. I think that so often, and I think we talked about this somewhere this week, that I talked about running a reunion program for 1,500 people. And we intentionally we set a time for when we were going to sit down and review the weekend. And, and the challenge was, no one who came to that review knew as much about the event as we did.
Right.
They showed up. They have a concept of how much we worked to put it all together and all the things that we were trying to accomplish with it. And yet they still had their own feedback. And I think that's at the time I couldn't see that.
Right.
At the time, it was like them nitpicking, because we would walk away and we get up, and because we were there when people left and they stayed overnight, so they dropped off their keys and they would tell us what a great weekend they had. And I took that as wow, it was awesome. People loved it. We haven't got hardly any feedback that I would have considered at the time negative.
Right.
And what I didn't realize is that was all anecdotal. It was just them making a comment based on a feeling. And so then to go into a meeting and have people nitpick at, the water didn't show up on time, or somebody thought their dinner was cold, or, whatever the case might be, the flow of one meeting didn't go the way that they maybe thought it should, even though nobody noticed it but us. And so I would always go in dreading those meetings, dreading them, because I just knew what was coming. And I think people were trying to be like, yeah, it was great. Here are a couple of few things that might help it. And I think they thought about it might help it be better.
Right.
And I think at the time, I didn't really see this at the time, that it just would make it different, not necessarily better.
Right.
Anything in that makes sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. I'm digesting it. It's a lot, there's a lot there, but I think it sets us up for next week where we talk about recalibrating. We're going to look at how we recalibrate when we get that feedback. So it's the logical next step in this process.
So it's interesting. Here's a comment from Stephen that I want to share.
Okay.
He says, I'm not sure, because he does this, I think, he speaks into it.
Text to speech.
Text to speak. So it says, my best feedback comes from the fact that I always give feedback. Does that make sense? If you are a learner, I'm a student, I switch tables and it helps me remember. Yes, I think that's one definitely way to assess yourself, is not only your perspective, and also when you can take your hat off and think about the perspective of the others around in their shoes. Not always easy to do, and I go back to my presentation that I was talking about, is when I try to give myself feedback, I say, okay, as the presenter, here is what I observed. Now let me take the presenter hat off and put off the hat of the person in the audience and try as best I can, because I don't have their knowledge, experience, or perspective, so I can't completely gather it. Although I could come up with some ideas, just based on how they interacted. And I think that's really helpful. And I think It's also a little dangerous, because we are assuming.
Dangerous or reckless?
Ooh, look at you. It's a little reckless, yes. Because we really
I haven't seen us use the word dangerous before, so that you threw me on that one.
I don't know. Reckless. I love that. I don't know why I didn't think of that.
I know. I'm very surprised. I had to be the one to bring reckless to the table.
Because we don't truly know. We can try to imagine, yet it usually is an assumption. Just because somebody is on their phone, let's say, in a presentation, it doesn't necessarily mean they're not paying attention. They may have had an immediate urgent text message from someone that they had to react to. And if I just
taking notes,
or they could be taking notes, and I just happened to see them in that one moment while they were on their phone, and the assumption I might make is they're not really paying attention. They've lost interest. I've lost them in this presentation. And so I think it's helpful to try to do it as best we can. And I also think that it's just feedback. It's not, we can't be 100% certain until we ask them. And then we have an opportunity to hear their perspective that brings in everything, all the pieces that we didn't have when we were trying to consider it. And I think the fact that you're always giving feedback, Stephen, is a good thing. Not everybody's going to see it that way. Actually, it's just a thing. Not everybody's going to see it that way, because some people don't want others' feedback, and I think that is another part of it. Is, that if you're trying to assess someone else's effort, that's probably another show. Mm-hmm. Is being certain that they're looking for feedback. Not everyone is at the point where they want feedback. So
I think we've dug deep into this week. If you didn't catch some of the earlier episodes, I recommend you go back and listen to them or watch them, because there was a lot going on there. And I certainly think that there's an opportunity here. And next week, as I said, we'll be talking about how you recalibrate once you get that feedback, whether it's your own or other people's. So I'm looking forward to that, because that's really where the gold is ultimately.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's in how do you take your next step, right? How do you better understand and figure out how to move forward? And you sort of determine how much that assessment has an impact on what's real for you, on your knowledge, experience, and perspective. All right. Well, thanks so much for being with us today. If you have a discovery of the week you'd like to share, please feel free. You can put it in the comments. If you're listening to the podcast or you don't feel like sharing it in the comments, you can go to our two groups, the Ring of Renegades and the Renegade Success Network for Leaders on LinkedIn and the Ring of Renegades on Facebook, and share your discoveries there, because there will be a post up in both of those groups, where you can share your discoveries of the week. And it can be about this topic, or it can be about something completely different, because what we know is that people are in all different spots, and what discovery you share might be exactly what they happen to be searching for. So please feel free to go inside of those spaces and share your thoughts and ideas, because we know it will help others, and it might help yours just by sharing it. So we look forward to seeing you inside of those groups. If not, we will see you Monday morning, 7 a.m. Eastern time, for our next episode of Today's Antidote. Have a great day, everyone.
Hey, embrace the renegading you today and this weekend. And today is National Dessert Day. So go have dessert today. I'm giving you permission. And if you're like Tom, it's got to be a dessert that's chocolate, no fruit. If you're like me, a lovely apple pie, cherry pie, peach cobbler, yum. He's not saying.
Thanks for listening to Today's Antidote, powered by the Renegade Success Network. The Renegade Success Network helps you confidently create your own unique pathway to success. To learn more about the Renegade Success Network and how you can take your next step, follow us on Twitter, connect on LinkedIn, or join the Ring of Renegades Facebook group. For full details on how you can join our community, go to renegadesuccessnetwork.com. Embrace the renegade in you.